Yo, what's up guys? Imagine Create Destroy here. In this week's video, I'm going to tackle my massive backlog of minis I've collected over the last year of making dioramas. Specifically the Citadel skulls and this Dead Warlord D&D mini. When I see cool minis, I tend to impulse buy them with no clear idea of what I'm going to make with them. And every once in a while I'll get a spark of inspiration of what to do with them. With this build, I was laying in bed thinking of what to do next, and it hit me. What if I did a diorama with the Dead Warlord? Specifically the one on his throne, with a pile of skulls and a blood river flowing through the landscape. So, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Let's go ahead and get started with this week's build, guys. I started off by gluing the throne and these stone pillars I had from my drawer of minis to a piece of XPS foam, then glued that to a couple more slightly bigger pieces. Once those were in place, I busted out my utility knife and started hacking away at the foam to give the Skeleton King height to look down upon anyone stupid enough to present themselves to him, or her. I guess it's kind of hard to tell if a skeleton is a boy or a girl. But anyway, after I dismembered the foam, I didn't like how tall it was, so I ripped off the bottom layer and moved on to adding a walkway up to the throne. In all honesty, I just cut the foam way too steep to walk up, so I'm adding this to fix it. Trimmed up the walkway so it doesn't look like a brick hanging off a boulder. After I finished there, I got out my dab torch and roasted the sides. This hardens the foam and helps chip away at the foam easier when I'm doing the next step. To give the rock a more rock-like texture, I'll cut horizontal and vertical lines in the foam, then use the back of the utility knife to chip away at the foam, giving it a more rock-like rocky texture. Next up, I'll fill the gap lines between foam layers with this Liquitex modeling paste, then I primed it black. I'll glue that down to another piece of XPS foam, which made me realize all I've been doing so far is gluing foam together, cutting it up, then gluing it to more foam. But I'm almost done with that, so don't worry. My wife's been getting mad at me for using the foam cutter inside, which is understandable because it smells absolutely terrible. It's probably not very good for you either. So I'll take that outside, cut out the spot for the river here, then we'll move on to the next step. I used this texture paste from AK Interactives for the ground, then sprinkled on some desert soil, also from AK, just to add a bit more texture to the ground. I'll wait for that to dry and then we can work on putting all the skulls down. The process of adding the skulls was pretty easy, just took a lot of fucking time. I cut out the skulls, trimmed up the mold lines, and started gluing them down. Now, it may seem quick because of editing, but just placing the skulls and figuring out good spots for them took me an entire night. Since this process is pretty self-explanatory, I'll stop talking and let y'all enjoy some music while I finish up here. At this point, I was starting to get really excited for the build. It was starting to look pretty sick. Now, what's one of my videos without me forgetting to hit record, at least once, which happened when I primed the build. I primed the ground with the dark earth green, the skulls with the dark brown, and anything that'll eventually be rocks black. For painting, I'll start with the rocks. First, I'll use a tan to base them, then hit it with random splotches of gray and golden brown to add some much needed color variation. I dry brushed it all with a suede, then used a pure white to just highlight the most raised edges. These rocks look pretty shit at this point, but the washes will really bring everything together. I'll start with a black wash over everything, then splotch on a brown wash. I'll dry brush the ground with another earthy green tone, just lighter in color, and apply a thick Citadel brown wash. The reason I specifically use a Citadel wash here is because it dries shiny, giving a wet ground look, which I really like. And now we can move on to the best part of this build, the skulls. I really wanted to go all out on this diorama and paint it to the best of my ability, which I'll admit isn't very high, but I tried my best. I started with the dark brown, moving my way up to lighter browns until I reached an off-white for the smallest highlights. When doing this, I highlighted smaller and smaller areas when I moved up to lighter browns. What's a diorama with 150 skulls without a blood river flowing through it? And the answer is a shit diorama. I'll start by hot gluing on acrylic to the sides, then dye the resin with alcohol inks. I use a lot of red and black to darken it up a bit. Then I'll mix it for the recommended 10 minutes, which is a pain because I'm weak and 10 minutes is a long time. I'm I'm always scared of the resin spilling, so I made a tinfoil boat to catch it in case of disaster when pouring the river. I'll tend to it with my torch to pop any bubbles for about an hour or so, and we'll wait a couple days for it to cure. Most of the rivers I've seen are usually flowing, which I think is what makes a river a river. To give this effect of flowing water, I use gloss Mod Podge and my airbrush to blow it around. For the banners, I painted the raised edges with a dark gray, then the more raised edges with a less dark gray. Once that dried, I'll use Blood for the Blood Gods by Citadel to paint dye onto the banners, which I think is very welcoming for anybody wanting to talk to the Skeleton King here. This build was taking forever. My original plan was to try to paint him in metal, but I watched a video and it looked really hard, so I opted for an easier route and dry brushed him with a gold metallic paint. Pretty lazy, I know, but it looks decent. I used Blood for the Blood Gods again to add blood running from the piles of skulls into the river, which in my imagination is what gives the river its nice red tint. Then we can fill the blank space on the ground with various grass tufts and some muddy puddle effects by AK Interactives. I used an old brush to blend the puddles into the ground, just making it look a bit more realistic. I used a green wash on the rocks to add a nice slimy look, and lastly glue on some cardboard from a cereal box to the sides of the diorama to look a little bit cleaner. I used a big piece, then trim it off with my hobby knife so it has a nice flush fit. Finally, I'll paint the sides black with a black 4.0, and that's another diorama down. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and I'll catch y'all next week. Let's roll the beauty shots.
Get down in the car, one time give it all, bust it open hard, let me see you drop.